Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Technical Sergeant Trina. I'm a group military training leader with the Special Warfare Training Group. And today we're here to bring another professional development segment called Airmanship 200. So, like we'd like to start the stream, we're just going to talk about what Airmanship 200 is and why we do it. So, Airmanship 200 is a professional development curriculum that 2nd Air Force put on so that we can start giving our airmen in training who just got out of basic training some professional development to help them pursue or progress through their career in a more meaningful way. Now, what we're going to be talking about today is the topic of ownership, and know that everything that we talk about is going to be my opinion or whoever else I have on opinion. It's not really necessarily condoned by the Air Force aside from the actual curriculum that we discuss. So originally Airmanship 200 is supposed to be a facilitated conversation between myself or one of my line MTLs over to a group of about 30 airmen. So what we're going to try to do today is when we have this discussion and talk and go over the curriculum, we're going to talk about it in the aspect of an airman in training, and we're going to talk about this in a way that hopefully what you can do as an airman is you can go ahead and go into the live chat. If you're viewing on a mobile phone or a tablet, try and get into desktop mode so that you can get into that live chat. You'll have to have a YouTube account or a Gmail account or something to that effect, and then you can go ahead and chat it up. We'll be asking questions, and I'll be asking questions of my guest, and do your best to see if you can have what we really want is your perspective. We want the airman in training's perspective, the guy that's in the dormitory who's trying to get through the day, trying to get through his training so that he can become an operational asset to the United States military. And with that, the guest that I have today is Chief Master Sergeant Clark. Hey, Chief Clark, would you mind, sir, introducing yourself?
Yeah, hey, thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. And thanks to all those out there. This is Chief Clark, Jamie Clark, Command Chief of the Special Warfare Training Wing. It's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to the opportunity, and I greatly appreciate Tech Sergeant Trina to kind of invite me into this piece right here because it's informative and it's important. So again, I look forward to it, and I think we should just press on and get started.
Awesome,
Chris, back over to you.
Cool. Thanks, Chief. Really appreciate it. So today's topic, ownership, and even in the beginning of this topic, we're gonna take some ownership over the material. So, and what I mean by that is, you'll look at the introduction. It says main point 1, 2, and 3. This is from when I guess creating the material, they mistakenly put the wrong introductions for the page. So that's not what our main point 1 and 2 are. Main point 1 is going to be a site visit. So ownership, how the Air Force wants us to go through this material is, we are supposed to take a group of airmen, and they want us to take them over to a meaningful site. And what they mean by that is either a static display or a facility that's named after someone, in a way that we can talk about that and why the Air Force does that. Why do we name something the way it is? Like, why do we give a building, like why do we call Forbes, or why do we rename the Medina Annex to Chapman Annex, or why do we have on our base Colonel Schroeder's DZ? So what I want to talk about today is I want to talk about how ownership fits into that and why we do those renamings and how we feel about those things. And then specifically I want to address Colonel Schroeder's DZ because I feel like personally for me, while for those of you guys who don't know, I'm going to go over that real quick, Chief. For those of you guys who don't know, this is Lieutenant Colonel Schroeder, and in 2016 he lost his life in defense of the people around him up at the training unit. So a disgruntled airman came up there and wanted to pretty much start some stuff, and he defended the individuals in his office, the individuals in the unit, and sadly the airman and him lost their lives. This is Colonel Schroeder's DZ, and it's just so that we can come in and pay respect and tribute to him and the legacy that he left, and the reason why I can be here at this unit and do great things is because he was able to provide that level of defense to our airmen and to the staff of the unit. And then this is Colonel Schroeder's. This is a larger plaque of Colonel Schroeder that's over there close to our facility, not necessarily the DZ, but it's another thing that we try to maintain and keep clean. So anybody who wants to come see, they can take a look at his citation and know what he did for our community. So thinking about that, the idea of this, what we're going to talk about now, is questions should facilitate a cognitive level thinking about the site itself to build understanding of the site's importance. Ownership shouldn't be introduced. Focus should be knowledge based on the site and its importance. So if I was to take airmen out to the Colonel Schroeder's DZ, I'd show them, I obviously talk to them about Colonel Schroeder, what he did, and the reason why it's meaningful. But what I want to tell them now is in the image previously, we saw that little circle. I just closed out of it. We saw that little circle, and that circle it's clean. There's no weeds. It's in a field surrounded by grass. It's in a field, like, there's all sorts of, anything can be out there for the most part, and it's clean. The rocks are raked. They got no grass. The weeds are pulled. It's got a nice edged perimeter, and that's because it's not because no grass grows there. That's for sure, right? It's because we as airmen go out there and make sure that we want to live up to Colonel Schroeder's legacy and take ownership of that site, right? We put our own pride, the same pride that we have in ourselves and the work that we do as airmen and as civilians and as in our professional growth and development. We take pride in that site to make sure that it looks good, so that at any point in time, anybody who's looking to pay respects to the great things that Colonel Schroeder did can go out there and see that. So that's really what I'd be saying to the airmen. Now, and then telling them about the site. And then we'd probably be out there all together. We'd be out there pulling weeds, just making sure it looks good and it's maintained appropriately. So, Chief, what I want to ask you is, like, how do you feel about ownership? And then what do you think about that idea that taking over, like, I don't own that site. The government owns that site, right? But I'm going to take ownership over it and try to make sure it's maintained without being asked, so that we can keep that level of respect for what he did. How do you feel about that, Chief?
No, that's a great question and a great perspective. I think at the end of the day, when we look at things like that, and we look to memorialize individuals or certain events, because you can memorialize an event as well. Mm-hmm. In this particular case, the Schroeder DZ memorializes him, but more importantly, it memorializes his character and what he stood for and what he believed in. I mean, certainly the actions on that day, where he actually prevented a much more worse situation than what already was. From an ownership perspective, he owned that day from a standpoint of protecting his people, his organization, and that is a complete and utter humility that he had in regards to what he did. When you take that piece right there and you figure out a way to how do you memorialize him and what he did, you go down to the point to where the site that you would be showing them physically, but obviously virtually right now, is to basically talk through again the things that he did and what he represented. And that's the most important thing, because when you memorialize somebody or a site or some type of event, what you're really speaking to is the actions and the significance of it. So memorializing that drop zone on behalf of him and his family, which is a very, very important thing to remember too, because it's also about his family and what they represented. I can think of no better way to carry on their legacy. Over to you, Chris.
Absolutely. Chief, so as we go through this, thinking about ownership and what we do and how we can kind of provide that, some of the stuff that when I was reading through not just this material, but just trying to do research on ownership and the ownership in reference to leadership principles, I found a quote from Amazon, like just their jobs application process for the most part, and it says, "Leaders are owners. They think long-term and don't sacrifice long-term value for short-term results. They act on behalf of the entire company, beyond their own team. They never say, 'That's not my job.'" Now, in the training that we provide in the Special Warfare Training Group, and I'm sure across the Air Force, right? I think ownership is probably a huge, huge aspect of that level of training, right? When we have one of the other aspects that we teach very, explicitly is going to be is the team aspect, right? You got to do everything for your team, and having ownership as part of that means that you have to have accountability for yourself. How do you think about ownership? How do you think that ties into the team aspect and what we do in the Special Warfare Training Group?
Yeah, certainly. Without question, it's a significant part of the fabric, if you will, of what we're trying to do for each and every trainee and what they aspire to be through the training process and the AFSC they're aspiring to be. The teamwork portion of it is a huge endeavor, if you will, in terms of understanding themselves better, but more importantly, how do they actually help the individuals to the right and left of them get to where they want to be? Mm-hmm. So in order to help them, they've got to own themselves, but more importantly, they've got to help own the process to get those individuals there. It goes without saying that anything we do is without question a team effort and event. But that's the Air Force motto as well. It's one of those unwritten things that isn't necessarily talked about in regards to a lot of language, if you will, but more importantly, it is actually echoed in regards to everything we do from a teamwork first type of mentality. Back over to you, Chris.
Absolutely. So teamwork first mentality and taking ownership of your part of that team and making sure that you're physically ready, making sure that you're mentally ready, and all that's involved, all the preparation that's involved behind the scenes, so that when you are mission ready and you're a valuable asset, once you get to your first duty location, you guys can actually be utilized, and you guys won't be a burden on that team. You'll be an improvement to that team. So as you guys go through, and especially when we're talking about this in reference to Colonel Schroeder's DZ, we don't want to be a burden to the legacy that he left. We don't want to be a burden to the training pipeline. We want to make sure that we utilize these resources appropriately. So if you guys are down here and you're doubting what you're doing, like, go over to Colonel Schroeder's DZ. Look at what he had. Read the citation over there by the flagpole. Go to Colonel Schroeder's DZ. Pull some weeds. Make sure the site looks good. Go around it, and kind of breathe this in, because it wasn't too long ago. That's what, 4 years ago, that Colonel Schroeder was over there making sure that we could continue training. So get over to that site, take a look at it, and kind of feel what that means to leave a legacy and to have something that you as an airman are part of. And we have that everywhere. We have that as the Chapman renaming. We have that in a whole bunch of facilities are named after different people. It doesn't necessarily have to be specifically Colonel Schroeder's DZ, but guys, that is one of the first things that you can have a direct connection with your training pipeline on how you can leave a legacy. So as we continue through the training material here, let's see. So Chief, if you were bringing someone important to you on base, would you be proud to show them the sites that are around base? Not just Colonel Schroeder's DZ, just, I guess, the whole training compound that we got.
Yeah, Chris, so if I heard you, the question was, if I was to bring somebody on base, would I be proud to show them the sites within the Special Warfare Training Enterprise or on base?
Let's go with Special Warfare Training Enterprise, since that's kind of the one that's completely under your purview.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Anything underneath the Special Warfare, regardless of anything that has to be available to us or what we actually are under control, I would be proud to show them. I acknowledge that, the things we're doing right now, and we're a nascent organization because this wing is only coming up on 2 years removed from being conceived, if you will. But the things we got right now, the resources we got, more importantly, the people that we have right now are remarkable. So I would not flinch whatsoever to show any of the guests, if you will, any of the people that we have, regardless of their job, the shops that they're in, the organizations they're in, the sites that we have, the training apparatuses. Anything of that nature, I would not be ashamed whatsoever to show them, because I'm confident that what we're doing is having a profound effect on the Air Force and certainly the homeland, if you will. So no, absolutely not. Would not be afraid to or concerned with showing them anything. Over.
Hey, Chief, here's a follow-up to that one. So with that in mind, I mean, I get it. I completely agree with you. Everywhere that we have our footprint right now, I'm really proud. And in fact, I was talking to one of the MTLs yesterday and trying to go over this topic, and I was telling him about, hey, I want to talk about Colonel Schroeder's ZZ, and then shortly after I was telling him about that, he immediately had airmen out there at that DZ. There was Sergeant Postma, our line MTL over with the Special Warfare Airman Transition Assistant Flight. He had airmen out there making sure that it looked good, raking the rocks, pulling the weeds, make sure it was perfect. So I can't be more proud of him for doing that. But outside of that, the next question that it asks us to talk about is who is the base a reflection of? And who do you think, if we're talking about our training compound, Chief, who's this a reflection of? And then how do we tie that back into ownership, Chief?
I'm sorry, say the question again.
Yes, it says, who is the base a reflection of?
As the base as in the Chapman Training or Lackland?
I'd say, well, let's talk about our organization, the Chapman Training Annex, and who is the base a reflection of, and how does that tie back into ownership, Chief?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about it. I think the reflection of the base represents who we are as the Air Force and what we try to do as a service to our commitment to the United States of America. I think that's the baseline. That there is, without any question, any base that is owned by the Air Force is a reflection and direct correlation to the Air Force and what the Air Force represents above and beyond anything else. Over.
Yeah, I completely agree. The base is a reflection of it's not just our leadership, right? It's not just a base reflection of Chief Clark. It's a reflection of all of our airmen within our organization. It's a reflection of the Air Force. It's a reflection of what we provide and the level of service we provide. So if our family or if members, whoever is coming over around Lackland Air Force Base, whoever's coming over around the Chapman Annex, if they're looking at and it looks dilapidated and it's in shambles and it looks bad, they're not going to think that we provide a level of service that's in accordance to the principles and the responsibility to bring death and destruction upon our enemies as the United States military. There's no way they'll be disappointed if the condition of our training base is in that way. So it's vitally important for us to take a little bit of ownership on it and make sure that we have a personal responsibility to provide that level of, I don't know, aesthetic professionalism, I should say, right? So that we can, so that we know we're giving confidence in the airmen that come in our family members that we support, in the American citizens that they can entrust death and destruction to this group of professionals that will utilize it responsibly. So
Hey, Chris.
taking ownership over that. Go ahead, Chief.
Chris, Chief, I got a question.
Yep.
I guess, I'm gonna flip it back on you, right?
Ooh.
So whether you want to answer this or you can actually pose this to the audience, what is your definition of ownership over?
Chief, my definition of ownership. So what I like to do is I like to think of no matter what I'm doing. So the Air Force has me right now, and they put me in different positions. The position that I'm in currently is obviously as an MTL. And because, and this is going to happen to you guys, airmen in training, wherever you're at in internet land, you guys are going to be put in a million different positions that when you get into the military or when you get to your first duty location and you become an operational asset. Now, my definition of ownership is less of a specific tied to a job and more tied to what I like to call a level of service. And that's kind of a term that we use in emergency services and stuff like that is this is the level of service that I will provide. And if I don't tie that into a position, if I don't tie that into a job and I tie that more to my dedication to work or motivation or trying to make sure I stay positive and trying to make sure that whatever mission leadership assigns to me, I do it to the best of my ability, and that means following through 100%. That means holding myself accountable, and in fact, that leads us into a couple of things that I was going to discuss a little bit later, which is going to be these 3 principles of ownership that I found on the Forbes website in an article. It says define accountability, start with the end in mind, and don't be afraid. So define accountability, like I got to be physically fit, not just because I'm in the military, but because my primary job is firefighting, and I'm going to go back to that. And I've been away from the operational fire department for, or I will be after this assignment is done, for about 7 years. I got to be physically fit so that I can get back there and make sure that I provide, I can be a good teammate to the other firefighters that are on scene. But along with that, I got to be physically fit for the military, which means that even in times where it's not necessarily, maybe working out 3 times a week, like the normal Air Force PT schedule, 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, maybe that's not enough. And I try to hold myself accountable to that. And in fact, I try to emulate a lot of the stuff that we do in the Special Warfare Training Wing just for airmen in training, because they are physical beasts. So I think ownership is really less about the position, less about the item, and it's more about, for me, it's a level of service. So I can apply that to anything that I'm put in, because we have to be flexible and adapt while we're in the military. What do you think, Chief?
No, it's actually pretty good. Some things kind of come out from that. The words you use and all that. I think if I kind of layer in there a couple other words that I think are important to ownership, right? Mm-hmm. We talk about duty, accountability. Don't complain. Trying to find solutions to problems. Those are the things that are actually important when it comes to ownership. Don't run. Don't run from pressure. Embrace pressure. Don't run. Don't try to make excuses for any things that happen in terms of why you did or didn't get things done, or why things didn't happen to you the way you wanted it to. Those things are all healthy in regards to an individual developing who they are as well as how they can help others. So although ownership comes across fairly easy and it rolls off the tongue fairly well and it looks good and pretty on a piece of paper, exercising ownership is actually really, really hard, because you've got to have the character fiber behind who you are and what you're trying to do in order to make that happen. Again, you can read it all day long. Practicing it is a different story. Over.
Chief, I like how you put that. Practicing it is a different story, and in regards to trying to read it all day long and trying to think about this as the ownership aspect. Now, if we're talking about this to our airmen in training right now, what do you think they can do that means that they're taking ownership over their professional, I don't want to say professional, their ownership over their Air Force career, over their personal lives. These guys are living in the dormitory. They got to follow all the rules that us MTLs are yelling at them for, and the instructors are yelling at them for, and they're trying to get through the day. What do you think they can do that would be a practical aspect of implementing ownership in their lives?
Yeah, it's a good one. At the end of the day, I didn't choose their career path. I didn't ask them to come in the military. They chose to come in the military. I'm proud they came in the military, because without them, our future looks bleak. But why they come in the military and with the things they try to do, whether it's in our organization or other organizations in the Air Force, at the end of the day, it was their choice, and it's also their choice to make things better. So when it comes to owning things that they're responsible for and accountable for, man, they got to practice that. They're going to make mistakes. I don't expect them to be perfect. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. So why would I expect them to be perfect? I expect them to make mistakes, but I also expect them to learn from those mistakes. That's part of that ownership, if you will. That's part of that character. That's part of that accountability and responsibility. Now, the profession they choose, why are they in the Air Force, in this case, belonging to this organization, how do they kind of improve each and every day? Well, I like to put it this way. My job is not necessarily, I should say their job, but it's our job as well, is their job is to make the people to the right and left of them successful. It's not about them. It's about the people right and left of them. If they put their people to the right and left of them in position to be successful, I'm a firm believer that they're going to make themselves successful. So there's a lot of humility that has to come along with that. At this stage in their career, things look very bleak, if you will, because it's a long fuse, big bang, if you will. They come in the Air Force, they go through a multitude of training, long duration of training, long time in training. 2 or 3 years removed from them when they came in the Air Force, they finally get to their operational unit. They go out and do what they hope to aspire to do. That's a long time. Staying focused, staying very purposeful, staying committed, with humility and confidence, not in a strong work ethic, not with any remote ego, if you will. The reward at the end will be much more pleasurable than what they think it is right now. But I can't overstress the importance of actually covering down for their teammates, helping them be successful. Because if they do that, you create, basically you cover down in the sectors of fire, if you will. And I would tell you, man, it's more self-gratifying when they do that than it is thinking about themselves. Over.
So, Chief, thinking about that and trying to think about, at least from my perspective, of having a regular interaction with the airmen in training, previously day to day, talking about these guys, helping them get through the difficult parts of the training mentally, and then making sure that they take care of themselves physically. Those guys, so when we're talking about ownership in the team aspect, they got to take ownership for the team. Like whatever stage you are and whatever level of leadership that you provide for that team, whether you're the team team lead or team captain or whatever you call it, whatever. If you're genuinely responsible for the team, or if you're just a supporting member, you still got to take ownership of that. And that means whoever is on your team, you got to help bolster them up. You gotta, if they're struggling in something, if they're struggling in getting their packs together, uniformed, if they're struggling with a certain aspect of the physical training, if they're struggling off duty, if they're struggling outside of the training day in the dormitory, just buying those Domino's pizzas all the time, and they're failing on those rucks, like be that good wingman. Be that good wingman. Tell them, hey, we got to get over. I get it, all right? I get it. No one necessarily likes heading over to the chow hall. I do. I like chow hall. I think it's all right. But going over to the chow hall may not necessarily be that Domino's pizza that y'all like in that dormitory. But please, if you can, make sure that you think about your physical fitness. Make sure that you plan for your physical readiness. And that doesn't mean eating a whole bunch of carbohydrates and having all that pepperoni everywhere and getting those boxes all over. That means making sure that you think about planning for hydration. Drink a gallon a day if you have to, especially if you guys are in training. Make sure that you get your electrolytes in. Make sure that you're following the nutritionist plan. Our training honestly, our training is amazing, and we have some of the best individuals. We have nutritionist plans. When I went through training, I didn't have a nutritionist. These guys have that available to them now, so I need them to take advantage of that, and that's kind of what I think that our airmen, so a couple of things that our airmen can do right now when they think about ownership. Own the team. Own the pipeline that you're in, and prep for it, plan for it. Know that you have the graduation in mind. That beret's already on your head, guys. And the people who are wearing that beret right now, they did this. They went through, they planned, they made sure that they didn't focus on the right now. In fact, actually, I got to read you off a quote that I was talking with one of my airmen on, Chief, because I thought it was absolutely excellent. So I had one of my airmen. I was in work recently, and I was talking to one of my airmen. And he was telling me about about some of the struggles that he had going on, and he was telling me how much he was thinking about those struggles. And then he said, "You know what? I'm done with that." He said, "I'm done thinking about those struggles." He said, "I've spent a lot of time thinking. I've spent a lot of time thinking about self-awareness, thinking about all his problems." And then he said, "I'm done. I need to work on self-improvement over self-awareness." So he realizes it. I'm here. This is what it is. This is the situation. I'm not going to dwell on it. I'm going to start dwelling on the fixes and the improvements. And then when he told me that, I wrote it down. I had to write it down immediately because I was like, dang, that's amazing. I'm working on self-improvement over self-awareness. I mean, that's awesome. What do you think about that, Chief?
Nah, it's good perspective, right? I mean, again, I didn't hear who this member was, or how many times, how long they've been in the Air Force, or what their job is. Regardless, though, it's pretty interesting, the commentary, if you will, and how he framed that in terms of self-awareness and things of that nature. They're onto something, though, right? I mean, let's be honest. It's a different way of looking at a problem. It may seem the same, but it's actually a little bit different in terms of actually how you view and how you think. And that's the most important thing. Especially when you feel yourself going down a negative path,
Mm-hmm.
how do you kind of pull yourself out of that negative path, if you will? So what he brought to light was pretty interesting. I would also comment in terms of, at the end of the day, dwelling on things is never going to get you anywhere. You're entitled, again, to have a bad day. You're not required to be perfect. I certainly wouldn't expect that of you. But dwelling on something is not going to make your situation better. You're entitled to think about it, to reflect, in order to get something out of it, so you don't make the same mistake, or you can react differently going forward. That's a good thing. But dwelling, in terms of continuous dwelling, only creates toxicity within you and the people around you. Before I get off my soapbox on that, though, Chris, is the leadership part. You brought up leadership a few times during the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at the end of the day, being a leader is tough. At the end of the day, being a leader is tough. Being a follower is harder, because it takes somebody strong. It takes somebody to understand the situation, that when it comes to listen to what that leader says, they have to do it unequivocally. Because if you don't, the team falters. The team will not be as progressive and as cohesive or as effective if the followers don't get on board and support that leader. Doesn't matter if you like that decision of the leader or not. You got to support that leader. So being a follower is really, really hard, because you got to be able to get over yourself. The leader itself is obviously hard, because, man, they're the ones that are accountable for the individuals and their actions of those underneath them. And then they've got to put those people in position to be successful. So a leader is hard as well. But I just wanted to kind of jump in there real quick and kind of highlight that being a leader is tough. There's no doubt about it. Likewise with being a follower. Over.
Chief, yeah, I completely agree, and I think having that ownership, whether you are a leader or a follower, depending on where you're at in your career or in your team, it's vitally important to have that level of ownership. And there's a whole bunch of aspects of leadership, right? And one of the ones that we're talking about is ownership. And with that, what I'd like to ask you, Chief, is can you cite any specific examples in your career of where you've seen ownership or even lacks of ownership in your time in the Air Force?
Yeah, I think we all have, right? Some major, some minor, some in the middle, right? Mm-hmm. Ownership, again, to me, is about owning, doing what you're supposed to do as an individual, regardless of your job, regardless of your rank. If you're in charge, you need to take charge. So to me, that's ownership. So have I seen it falter or fail? I have. Thank God, I wouldn't say that I've seen it to the point to where it was life, limb, or eyesight, but nonetheless, individuals have failed. I will tell you right now, probably every single day we walk by, we probably see, ownership fail a little bit. As an example, look at uniforms. Do individuals roll up their sleeves at the end of their arms, right? If no one corrects them, then obviously that's not, that's a felon ownership, because you're part of the fabric of the United States Air Force to carry out the policies and guidance that is required. And if you don't, correct that individual, then, man, you just failed. That's a very minor one. Mm-hmm. Extreme ownership, extreme failure is, yeah, man, I've seen things to where guys did some things in regards to, we've seen it all over the place, right? in regards to making terrible decisions and bad judgments that put themselves, more importantly, the people that are around them, at risk. And that's never really good. So I tried to think of a real specific, profound one. And right now, nothing comes to me, but I know that I've experienced, a range of failure and ownership over.
So, Chief, as you progress through your career, and I know that, like me and just a crusty old tech sergeant now, I mean, you being an old chief, been in for however long you've been in, Chief.
Hey, you almost came close to saying crusty old chief.
I didn't say it.
It was like I sensed it was coming right off your tongue, and all of a sudden you pulled it back. That's okay. You can say it.
I didn't say it, Chief. I didn't say it. I wasn't gonna do it. I mean, you don't have that normal grayed hair from most of these crusty old chiefs. Like, your hair is still full bodied and still in there, so I can't use that terminology for you right now, Chief.
I knew I liked you. There's a reason why I liked you. I think you just nailed it just now.
So, what I mean by that is, as you progress, if you can think about previously in your career, maybe even as a tech school student, or early on in your career, then as an NCO, and now being a senior NCO, has your definition or your vision, or I don't want to say vision, has your definition of ownership changed at all? Has it been the same since the beginning, or how has it progressed through your your development in the military?
No, it's actually a really good one, to be honest with you. And I think as I've been coming up on 26 years in the military this July. Very thankful for that. The Air Force has provided a lot for me, a lot of opportunity at the end of the day, is whether or not I chose to employ those opportunities, if you will. But the Air Force has been really great to my family and I. I think from day one to where I sit right now, my perspective on ownership has changed. I think it's just due to the fact of growth and development and breadth of experience that I've been exposed to, and the people that I've been exposed to as well. That as you encounter certain situations, you sometimes you know what to do, and sometimes you don't know what to do. And that just, that is part about the development of an individual and the profession that they're in. So yes, it has changed. It really has. I'd be lying to you if I said it didn't, because as you progress through the military and hopefully you make the rank that you want to, as well as the rank that you deserve, jobs will change as well. And as a result of that, certain decisions have to be made. In order to make and complement those decisions, you got to have the breadth of experience in order to do that. So long answer to your question, it has changed from the first day of B&T to where I sit today. Over.
Yeah, Chief, I agree. Just I've been in for 11, so just in my time that I've been in, my ownership has changed. I'd say early on, there's a lot of instances in my career where I shirked responsibility. So, just in regards to training, right? At least for me, like, I'm gonna give these examples. There's times where once you get to your operational department, or once you get to your operational location, whatever job that you're in, you're gonna have to do training exercises with that. And then as you go through those training, there's going to be a lot of things that you're personally responsible for, and there's going to be a lot of things that you're not personally responsible for. As an airman, going through and being part of this team that's dedicated to a mission and a vision. With that, you got to take ownership ties into that by making sure that you do your part. But then think about this, as an airman, and me being in 11 years and Chief being in 26 years, we are progressing through our careers, and someday you won't be airman basic, whoever, airman first class, whoever, senior airman. You're going to be staff sergeant. It was airman trainer. It was airman basic trainer, airman trainer, A1C trainer, senior airman trainer, staff sergeant trainer, technical sergeant trainer. And all of those things lined up with additional responsibilities. But prior to me being a technical sergeant, prior to me being a staff sergeant, the things that I was thinking about was, how do I make sure that I prep myself so that the transition between each rank is more seamless. Let's put it that way. And if you can do that, that's part of taking ownership over your professional development in your career. And I'm not trying to talk myself up whatsoever. What I'm trying to say is, guys, look at where you're at, look at where you want to be, and be the airman that you'd want to supervise. Be that individual. That's taking ownership over who you are and the level of service that you provide to the Air Force and the job that you bring to the fight. So Make sure that you adhere to our core values and principles and standards, customs, courtesies, and the disciplines that we have in place. I love that, Chief, I love that you brought that up about uniform compliance, because even now, there's tons of people who don't necessarily adhere to uniform compliance. And we all know, like, is that gonna be the thing that makes the mission fail? Probably not. But is it something that helps your leaders know that they can trust you with small details, important details? Is it something that they can evaluate your ability to adhere to the orders that are given? Absolutely. They can look at you as an airman. They look at whether or not your uniforms, maybe not necessarily pressed anymore. That used to be a big old thing where you had to iron your uniforms, but they can look at your uniform, make sure that you have everything on it. Make sure that you have your pockets all zipped up, Velcroed down, everything looks good. If you have creases in your uniform, oh my goodness, you're going above and beyond. They can look at you immediately and see if your hair's in regs, and they can say, hey, does that guy care? Does he care about his, do I want to give this guy something important? Because if you're not even taking ownership of yourself, your personal hygiene, your room, right? You guys being in technical training, that, and I say your room, and I absolutely mean, I say that with quotations. It is the government's room that you are utilizing while you're in technical training. If you guys take ownership over that and make sure that it's cleaned, make sure that you're adhering to the student handbooks, and guys, if you don't have a student handbook, go see your MTLs. And if you guys can do that at this stage in your career, I can't tell you how much responsibility that you're going to get quickly, right? Those little things add up to a lot when leadership is looking down at you trying to find out, I have this important mission or I have this important task, and I got to give it to somebody that I trust. It's a no-fail mission. Now, who's put together? And it's that guy who cares. It's that guy who's caring about who's taking ownership over his own physical fitness. The people around him. The guy who's helped uplifting those individuals. So, guys, as you guys are in those dormitories, look for those opportunities. Try to find those opportunities that help you. This is your Air Force. Chief even said it right now. He said, like, look, you guys are coming up to replace us, and it's vitally important that you do that. And that means that 20 years from now, hopefully for some of you, 20 years from now, you might be sitting in Chief's slot. And if you are, if there's still these problems that you see today, any problem that you identify today, it's not a problem that he caused. It's a problem that you're causing. So take note of that, guys. Chief, I think we kind of hit it on the head. I mean, we're tying this into what ownership is being part of an airman. That's one of the questions that we have to cover. It says, is ownership part of an airman? And then in closing, it says, let's discuss the definition of airmanship and how ownership fits into the culture and pride of professionalism. What do you think, Chief? Do you think we have any final words on ownership and how it's part of being the culture in the Air Force?
Nah, Chris, I think you did a great job in number one, troop leading this, number two, teeing it up, and actually then the narrating this piece right here. Without you, this endeavor would not be where it's at today. So we're grateful as an organization and certainly the Air Force and what you're doing right now. In terms of the actual airmanship piece, I think we hit the nail on the head. I think there's a lot to discern and a lot to peel away in terms of the some of the things that we had talked about. I think for me at the end of the day, a couple of things kind of come to light on this. Is number one is and I was going to say number one, but I don't know if it is number one. But I'll just say number one in terms of the conversation is hey man, at the end of the day, nothing's for free. You got to go out and earn it each and every day. Part of that is the ownership portion of it. Number two is the accountability or responsibility that you have as an individual supporting your person to the right, left you, as well as the individuals above you, regardless if you like the decision or not. That's not the most important thing. The most important thing is listening to your leaders as well as supporting the individuals to the right, left of them, and getting them putting them in position to be successful. The third thing is, man, at the end of the day, we didn't choose your career path. Didn't choose you to come in the Air Force. Certainly didn't choose what you're doing right now. We are grateful and thankful that you did, because we think as you continue to develop and broaden yourself within the Air Force, you're only going to make this organization better in terms of the AFSC as you go forward, but more importantly, the Air Force at large. And then just realize that ownership has a lot of different meaning to a lot of different people. You got to just be comfortable with the things that you're doing and the decisions that you make, because they will have consequences. So the ownership portion of it will come into play, certainly right now, but long-term effects. Again, I appreciate everything that you guys are doing, and certainly, Chris, what you've done today and what you have and continue to do. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chief. Hey, Chief, I'll give you, I know you got a busy day, so I'll give you we'll sign off, and then I'm going to conclude the stream just talking about a few things in regards to airmanship and how we're going to move forward with streams, because there's a potential for us to kind of change platforms right now so that we can kind of have a better chat, because there's limited chat on YouTube. So we're talking about, as a leadership team, facilitating Airmanship, talking about trying to move this platform over to Facebook. So unless you have any final words, Chief, I think we're good to go.
Again, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Chief. All right, guys. So we talked about ownership. We had Chief Clark on, amazing guy. Always really, he's very articulate about how he adds in ownership and airmanship. So I'm pretty stoked about that and how that conversation went. If you guys have any questions in the chat, please feel free to speak up. If you don't want to bring them up right now, not a big deal. Go ahead and put them in a comment on the video, and then we can try and get back to that either on the next video or in some other fashion. If you give me your contact information, I'll easily try to get back to you. So with that, we talked about ownership. We talked about how it ties into airmanship. We talked about the site, Colonel Shorter's DZ, and why we need to have ownership. So making sure that we're proud, feeling proud, and being able to give others the perception that, because perception is reality. Give others the perception that we are responsible with the oh, 1 second, sorry, the mic is real quiet. Thanks, Rachel. Appreciate it. It should be better right now. So talking about Colonel Shorter's DZ and making sure that we take ownership over sites in the military, even if they're not ours, right? The idea is that we're responsible with the great burden that's placed upon the DoD to bring death and destruction to our enemies. And if we can make sure that in every aspect of our lives that we fit the bill, right? That we portray that responsibility, then it's much easier for anyone who's looking in, whether that be your leaders or your family or whoever, the American citizens, the population, whatever it is, whatever that motivating factor is that helps us get the mission done. They can feel that same responsibility or that same level of trust, so that we can continue to provide, mission success. Cool. So, hey guys, with that, one of the things that we've been thinking about is switching this live stream over to Facebook, and so that we can have some better chat interaction. So right now it's kind of difficult for people on the mobile platform or anywhere else to view the live stream and then also participate in the chat. So first and foremost, thank you guys, everybody who supported this live stream. I really appreciate it. All the airmen that have been in the chat, you guys have been great. And if you'd like, please, you can email the airmanship200@gmail.com, and you guys can give us some ideas for the stream if you want, or you can email us questions, or we can try and get, there's a potential for me to try and bring airmen on, but we're trying to think about ways that maybe we can enhance the stream, guys. So please give me your comments, put it in the comment section, email the Airmanship200 site. If you have my government email that government email, all that good stuff. And I wanted to do the shout out. I know I didn't say it in the beginning when I was talking about that quote from the Airmen, and let me read off that quote again for you. That quote was, "I'm working on self-improvement over self-awareness." And that was from Airman Nichols, who's over there in the Special Warfare Airman Transition Assistance Flight, or he might still be in training. If he is in training, I think he is. That was profound, and it absolutely made an impact on my career. So whatever stage that you're in your careers, know that you can have an impact on the people around you. And you can, I'm going to try and grow every day, and you guys should be trying to grow every day as well. So look at some of these leadership principles. If you guys want to go to the Airmanship 200 website, just go into Google, type in Airmanship 200. There's going to be some links for like headphones, and then outside of that, you'll see the government link, the ATC link, and then go through those topics and try to see how that they apply to you. And this isn't necessarily designed to say, like, I know that might feel a little bit corny, but the closer connection that you have to your professional development and your personal growth, and one of the things that we talked about previously is writing down your goals. If you can follow these principles, I mean, at least for me, the more I followed these principles, the more successful I've been. So I can only recommend that, especially when I've had such success by following the principles that are present. So go through that material, guys. See what it says, and see how it applies to your life and how you can apply it right now, like what you can do. Ownership, right? When we're talking about ownership, think about how you can apply that right now. As a technical airman, technical training airman, carry your mandatory items. Wear your uniform correctly. Adhere to curfew. Adhere to the nutritional guidance if you're in the Special Warfare Training Wing. And heck, if you're not, guys, if you're at any other locations, adhere to them anyway. We are in the Department of Defense, and we have to make sure that we can perform, and that's physical performance as well. I know that the Air Force is the most technologically advanced portion of the Department of Defense, which sometimes means, as others may call us, the chair force. Sometimes it feels like we may not have to have that physical readiness, but we do, guys. So it's important. With that, we're gonna close up the stream, and I'll inform you on the next stream if we end up moving to Facebook. I'll put a note up on the stream so that when you guys log in, it'll give the Facebook address and all that good stuff. So, thanks again, guys. Thanks for being part of Airmanship 200 and getting professionally developed. You guys have a good one.